Daycare? Okay. Please turn your phones off. And I say that every meeting, and
You're the ones who are right.
I was the last one to have it go off in the meeting, so. Or silence or whatever you wanna do, so.
You are alive now.
What's that? Okay. So I think we'll go ahead and begin. So, folks, welcome to the July 10th regular meeting of the Durham Planning Board. It was postponed from last week, the 3rd of July, because of holiday conflicts. Our first effort this evening is determination of a quorum. We have 4 members, which gives us a quorum. And so Mr. Lanoy, Mr. Durr, Mr. Puritan, and myself, John Talbot. So if you'll rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any amendments to the agenda?
I don't have any.
Seeing none. So the accepted, we don't have the June 5th meetings to accept, correct?
Correct.
Okay, we'll kick those out till the August meeting. Informational exchange on non-agenda items. So town officials would be, I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce George Thabarge is our town planner, so put a face with a name. So George, if you have any comments for the town officials?
Yes, I will start out just by clarifying that we have made arrangements for the minutes for these meetings to be taken. They weren't ready for this meeting because we were still trying to work out who was going to be responsible for that, but that's been assigned, so we should be good to go for next month, and you'll get both sets of minutes for that meeting.
Okay.
Also wanted to give you an update that last night the select board did appoint a steering committee for the community facilities vision planning. And so we'll be trying to get a initial meeting to kind of scope out the project for them as soon as we can get them together and get that project moving. The Resource Protection Working Group met and started initial work on that, and they've scheduled a meeting, the next meeting for July 31st. And the Select Board sent out an invitation today to Historic District Commission, and they're inviting the code officer, myself, and John Talbot to look at the potential overhaul of the historic preservation regulations, and they've scheduled that meeting for August 13th. And then finally, there is a Maine Municipal Association Planning Board and Board of Appeals workshop. They do this several times during the year. The next one, and I will be attending on July 30th it's in Freeport. So if any of you are interested, and if you haven't been to the workshop, it's very, very informative and helpful. You get a manual for planning boards and boards of appeals, and they go over legislative updates, any laws that have been changed. So it's usually about 2.5, 3 hours, and they do provide dinner. So if any of you would like to go, let me know and I will get you registered.
Where is that? Where is it located in Freeport?
It's at one of the hotels.
I can't remember which one. But it's worth going. I went 2 years ago maybe, and it does cover a lot of good stuff, and it is somewhat interactive. So if you've got questions about, hey, can we do this? Why can't we do that? Or how would you do that? They're very good. So it's usually like the 2 lawyers from MMA. I went at the end of COVID, and so I didn't get a free dinner. But it is worth, if you can. I know it's, for those of you who are not retired, it's harder to break loose. So
July 30th, you said?
That's all I've got.
okay, so residents, Those of you in the audience who have anything you would like to say? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to non-residents. Anybody who's not a Durham resident who has something to say? I always open it up in case somebody wants to say something nice about me. Never happened, so we are now on to continuing business, of which we have none. And the next thing is new business, maintenance agreement review for a backlot access easement at 470 Auburn Pownell Road, map 9, lot 26. And public comment will not be taken on this. So, please, come up to the mic, state your full name, your address, and that'll get us started.
All right, my full name is David Robert Behringer. My Durham address is 470 Auburn Pownell Road, although I currently reside in Portland. Do you want that address too?
No,
No.
we're
Okay.
good.
What we are trying to do is create 2 lots out of our 1 large lot, and create one of those lots will be a back lot, and so it will have an easement for access to get to it. So we're working on a road to meet town requirements for the road. We've had it surveyed, and we've developed this maintenance agreement for the road so that responsibility will be shared between the 2 owners of the 2 properties.
Okay. Mr. Thabars, do you have anything you would
I
like
can
to
just
add?
summarize the agenda notes that I provided to the board. And as I explained, that like many communities, Durham does allow this type of backlot access. And they need to create 300 feet of road frontage. That's what the backlot easement will do, create that for the back lot. And then they have a 50-foot right-of-way that can either be easement across a lot, or as in this case, or it can actually be a separate deeded strip. If it serves 2 or more lots, then they do have to have that maintenance agreement, and that under the current framework, which we've been trying to change, the responsibility for approving the backlot itself and the access easement is approved by the code officer, and then the maintenance agreement has to be approved by the planning board, which is why we're here tonight on this. So the ordinance requires that the road maintenance agreement include a statement of the ownership interests, a statement that any subsequent lots that are created must be party to the agreement, which obviously makes sense. It requires an acknowledgement that the town will not be responsible for maintenance of this access. And also a statement that the responsibilities transfer to all subsequent owners. And the ordinance currently requires that the planning board be notified of that. That almost never happens, that people notify the planning board when they sell their lots.
But it would be nice.
But technically it is in the ordinance, so they should be aware of that. The requirement that all deeds for the lots reference the maintenance agreement, and I did mention that currently the notes do not include that statement of that requirement, and so I've suggested that you could have them add that on to the as a note on the plan. And then if there's a requirement that if it's an extension of existing road, then they have to make an offer to all of the other private road, like Pound Road has no maintenance agreement. So if they were to do this off the end of Pound Road, they'd have to make an offer to everyone on Pound Road to join. They're not required to join, but they have to at least make an offer and put an affidavit that they did to that effect. Both owners have to have the authority to put liens on the other one for non-payment of maintenance costs. And then finally, there's a requirement that the maintenance agreement has to be recorded, and that the code officer won't issue any permits until that is recorded, just to make sure that it gets done. So you have in your packet the draft maintenance agreement and survey plan, and it appears to meet all the requirements except for that deed reference that I mentioned. And on this one, a simple motion to approve the maintenance agreement per your review of the documents, and the provisions of section 5.23 would be adequate facts to support your decision on the application.
Do we have any comments, or questions from the board?
George, I do. on page 3 of 26. The bullet point about the specific requirements for road maintenance agreement are as follows. Number 6, if the private way is an extension of an existing road, is that the town road? Or-
No, as I explained, Pound Road is a private road.
I don't know Pound Road well.
It's
Right,
where
goes to the Rod Gun Club.
Rod and Gun Club
Yeah, yeah,
access.
Okay, yeah. all
Yeah,
right.
so that's a private road.
Yeah.
And whether it's a public road or a private road, if you're extending off that, then wouldn't apply to a public road because the town maintains that. So like Pound Road is a private road, there's no road agreement now, and someone can put, and someone actually did put, one of these backlot access easements onto the end of Pound Road. And they would have to make an offer to everyone on the road to form an association to do the maintenance agreement. But that doesn't stop the applicant from doing it if they refuse to, because they could just say, no, we're not gonna do it, and then you won't be able to develop your property.
Okay,
So that's what that's talking about.
thank you. And number 7, just following that, the authority to place liens for non-payment of maintenance costs. Is that by the property owners?
Yes, they can, so what you end up with, and again, assume like you've got 6 people on a private road like this, and one of them notoriously doesn't pay their dues. So this requires that there be an authority in there to place a lien on their property to make sure that the payments are made.
That's part of the maintenance agreement?
Yep.
Okay,
As long as it's within the agreement, they have the authority to do that.
Correct.
It has to be right. Okay.
Any other ones, questions, Brian?
good, thank you.
Mark?
Almost up, thank you.
Alan? In that case, I would accept a motion.
I'll make a motion.
No, it's all right. We often look for planning board members, so keep that in mind next time. I will make a motion that we approve the maintenance agreement for backlot access easement at 470 Auburn Powell Road, map 9, lot 26, with the condition that, I'm gonna try to get the verbiage right, that there be a requirement that all deeds reference the maintenance agreement going forward.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, if you approve, raise a hand. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
And, just make sure you follow up with the codes guy and Calvin on roads, structures and all that
That's,
stuff.
the next step is Calvin, and our attorney is already putting it in, referencing it in the deed.
You're
So
good.
that should be fine, right? Okay,
Super.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
yeah.
Good luck.
Can you tell me, is the address still going to be
Talk to
470?
the code officer.
Code officer.
Yeah.
address.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, next thing up is a conditional use review for expansion of a home daycare at 706 Hallowell Road, map 7, lot 35. And public comment will not be taken, but if you all would join us, either one or both of you.
Do it. Hi, I'm Andrea Nash. I live at 706 Hollowell Road.
Okay. And what is it you'd like to do?
Currently have a licensed home daycare for 12 children, which is the maximum for a home daycare and a home business on my property. And I would like to build an addition onto my home to extend my capacity to 20 children. That's all.
Okay. George, can we pull that up on the screen if there's any questions about the layout?
We actually can't. So
cannot?
you have in your packets the diagrams that have been submitted.
Okay.
Did you get a printed version of that, John?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we do, there's a couple of steps for the approval. It's not as easy as the road maintenance agreement, unfortunately, for you. But the first thing we have to do is decide whether it is an appropriate use.
Okay.
So approve conditional use for a 20-kid daycare center. And so there's a checklist that we go through, and there's things we have to, now you've seen it, you've filled out parts of it, I think, in your package, the application.
Yep.
Safety and all that other kind of stuff.
Yep.
We'll go through that. I guess the question for the board is what we've been doing in the past and whether we want to continue to do that if it's necessary on this one, since we've gotten a lot of public input already, is do we want to have a public hearing? We can't do the public hearing this evening. Do we want to do a public hearing? Our next meeting is the 24th. Do we feel it's necessary to do that, or can we make a decision, yea or nay, on conditional use? And if conditional use gets approved, the next step is site plan approval.
Well, one of the questions I have is, one was the initial approval prior to expanding. When was that approved?
You mean when Robert Frost approved it?
He was the code guy, but,
Correct. Yep, so, or Forrest, he approved it in 2021.
Okay. So I'm questioning whether was there any public participation at that time?
I think
No, there would not be.
There wasn't.
Not a requirement, I don't.
Not for a home-based business.
I mean, normally, I don't think, unless we have, abutters are notified of this, correct?
Yep.
And I think a lot of the information that has come to us is from people that are not abutters. Correct?
I don't know all their addresses, but probably, I think, so, yeah, my guess is yes, that's correct.
So, I mean, my main concern is when someone comes through for conditional use, it usually is the abutters that may have questions. And if they haven't come forward, then is there a real concern? Granted, other people have the ability to do that if we have a public meeting. So what I'm getting at is, I don't necessarily feel that we need to have a public meeting.
Okay. Mark, Brian, your thoughts?
I agree.
I agree, I don't see a need for a public hearing.
Okay. Then, we will probably not do that. We have gotten a lot of input from a lot of people. And so that all gets taken into consideration as all part of the process here. So with that, let's go ahead and start with going through the conditional, through the checklist, is what I'm
Alright.
trying to say here,
Got it.
very badly.
Mr. Chairman, I do have updated copies in which I've made indication of the additional public input that you've done, summarized. Pretty much most of the comments came in support of the technical capacity of the applicant, so if you want to use these for your decision review process, I can give them to you.
I'll take a.
Probably be the latest,
It hasn't been updated on the,
Has not been on, the website included the public comment that received before we posted, the revised. Over the last couple of days, you've gotten in a lot of comment, and I've just summarized what that additional comment is.
so those are not they're not on the web as
Not
of
on
right
the
now.
web.
Yes, I
I
would
got
like one
printed
too.
copies and I brought extras, 'cause
Okay.
I thought people would be interested.
yeah, I would.
So if the applicant could have one, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we get started though, I do want to make sure that yours is a very regulated industry, as you know, I'm speaking to the choir. So there are things that the state will inspect, regulate, require them to do that I'm not sure all of them are in our purview. So the state will figure out whether the building's big enough for 8 additional children. As an example, whether their kitchen meets the requirements and so on and so forth. So I kind of like to keep our comments, our questions, our focus on what it is that is the town's
Correct.
role in approving this, is what I'm trying to get to here. So let us go forth then and do well. And so the first one, conditional, so there are, I think, 8 different issues that have to be considered. and then a final condition of approval. So the first one is public health impacts. The proposed use will not create, one other question as we're doing this, are we comfortable voting yay, nay on them as we go through? Do we want to go through all of them? And, because if, as I try to recall all the time, we have to vote on all 8 issues, yay, nay, or do we just want to go through all of them and then come back and vote on the individual ones?
I'm fine voting on as we address them.
Okay,
I agree with that. I think if you wait till the end, you're just gonna confuse things and.
works for me. Okay,
No comments are gonna come up.
so then public, and so what we'll do is we'll go through them, we'll discuss comments that have been received, maybe some new ones that we have, and then we'll vote on each one of these.
Okay.
So, number 1, public health impacts. The proposed use will not create unsanitary or unhealthful conditions by reason of sewage disposal, emissions to the air or water, or other aspects of its design or operation. So, Mr. DeBarges and the applicant and some of the input we received, there are A through D for comments. Okay, so the first one, the applicant stated in their application that increased waste for the 8 new children has been accounted for with the new septic system. So my understanding is you're getting designed, or you've already designed a new septic system, and we'll have that installed when you go to expand.
First thing,
If
yep.
it's approved.
Correct.
Okay, so I'll throw that caveat out there at the beginning.
Okay.
Okay, and that septic system is approved also by the state?
Yes.
The state health, HHS?
DHHS, Department of Health and Human
okay.
Services, yep.
So going forward. So I've already answered, or part B, you've got a new design. And then part C, the board received public comment questioning whether the well should be considered a public water supply requiring a 400-foot separation between the septic system and well. And George, when I looked at it, it's a total of 25 kids and employees, and then it comes under a different rule, but it doesn't necessarily say it has to be 400 feet.
Well, if the water system is serving, according to the state law, 25 or more people, like the leisure campground, for example, then they do classify that as a public drinking water supply, which has
Okay.
to meet certain testing requirements, and there is a 400-foot well separation for a system serving a public water supply. So it might be helpful for the board to get clarification for how many total people will be using this at any one time, to make a determination that it will not trigger the public health water system requirements.
Yeah, that's a question that comes up on a couple other cases. So 20 children, how many, because it'll come up with parking and other issues. How many employees?
Just probably 3 or 4,
Okay,
Would you have 20 children there all at once?
not always.
But there could be,
There could be.
okay.
so if what you just said, you're maxing out at 24,
Right,
okay, and that meets your state requirement for X number of adults per children.
correct.
Okay, so I don't think if you hold to that, and if you exceed that, is it safe to say the state DHS, whatever they are, will they then say you now have 37 people and do something? And I know that's an exaggeration.
I don't think they have anything to do with the public water supply. They only regulate the testing piece.
Okay.
I already have my well water tested for DHHS annually.
Okay.
But it's a different set of testing for the public water supply.
And I think what I'm trying to say is if you hit that public water supply threshold, you're gonna have to look at well separation and septic system.
Right,
Okay.
yep,
And you have an engineer working with you on the site plan?
correct.
Correct? Okay.
Yep, from Acorn Engineering.
Okay, and the board, next one is, the board received public comment on the adequacy of bathroom facilities. That's something that's set by DHHS?
Correct.
Do you,
There's a bathroom in the design.
Okay, and that meets the requirement for
Correct.
bathrooms. Okay? Is there anything else the board would like to ask about?
So I'm looking at the floor plan that was submitted as part of the, what, is it the existing garage? So is the addition from the existing garage back?
Correct.
Okay, so you include some storage, a mower, a shed,
Mhm.
mechanical room, bedroom, bathroom, and your facility.
Mhm.
Okay.
How much of that is daycare?
All of it except for the storage at the mower shed.
So the daycare starts at the wall that separates the mower, you're not licensing the mower and storage spaces?
Correct.
Anything else?
I have a clarifying question regarding your number of people.
Mhm.
So it's, the daycare will be for 20 children,
Correct.
plus 4 employees,
Maximum.
okay? And then it's attached to your home, so same water supply plus your family.
Correct.
So then what's your total number then?
Well, my family is included in the numbers. My husband
Okay.
is technically an employee, and my children come into my childcare, so it doesn't add.
Cool, perfect.
Okay, so any other questions, comments on number 1? I would gladly take a motion on number 1, please.
And John, I would suggest that you add a finding E, which indicates that the applicant has stated that there will be a maximum of 24
Adult,
people using the
People.
well.
okay,
Okay.
Yeah.
okay. Thank you, George.
I'll make a motion that the applicant has satisfied a reasonable burden of proof of compliance with the criterion for public health impacts.
Second.
Do we need to say the findings that we discussed plus E, there will be, George, I'm asking?
No, you've already added it.
Okay.
It'll be added up above.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, raise your hand if you vote to approve. It passes 4-0. So the traffic safety impacts. The proposed use will not create unsafe vehicular or pedestrian traffic conditions when added to existing and foreseeable traffic in its vicinity. You've stated there'll be an uptick of 4 to 6 vehicles at drop-off pickup. Is that about right?
Correct.
What are the hours? I mean, I assume they don't all show up at the same time. What's your busy window?
So I'm busiest around 8, but I'm open at 7, and the last couple of people drop off around 9. So I have 3 or 4 families dropping off around 8, and that's my busiest time.
Okay,
And then at pickup time, I close at 4:30. That's the trickiest bit because the majority of people pick up right around 4:30.
okay. All right, and then, so you've got some proposals here. Why don't you talk us through them rather than have me read them about adding parking spaces, widening the drive? Because that's a fairly significant concern.
Absolutely. So this is what we're working on with with Acorn Engineering, and a lot of it. So basically, we would be adding another lane onto our driveway. So our current driveway is basically 2 vehicles wide driving up to our garage. And then there's a whole area beside it that we would add another lane of driveway, except it would be wide enough for people to pull in and park perpendicularly to the current driveway. I have already asked my parents to start doing that. So it's been 2 weeks of them pulling into the driveway, parking perpendicularly, and then they're able to back out, and there's plenty of alley and like safe passage for children along the front of the vehicles to go in front of the garage.
But when you did say back out, you're not backing onto Route 9.
Correct, they're backing right out into my existing driveway, and then it's actually even safer than before because they're able to pull out onto Route 9.
Right.
And is this extension all gonna be asphalt, or is it?
I believe it's reclaim in my plan, but that since the original plan was made, we've hired the engineering team, and so I feel like they may advise me to do something differently.
Well, because there is a slope going into the driveway, and I'm just wondering about,
Yeah,
how- you know, when we have these torrential rains, you're gonna have washout if it isn't asphalt.
that's a good point. We would love to have asphalt.
You know, I've seen reclaim on, there's a road, there's a right of way that goes right by my house, and they have reclaim. And these last thunder showers they've had, it's not holding up well.
Yeah.
I'm just, it's if I was building it myself, I mean, we can make that a stipulation. Because the last thing we want that to be doing is coming out onto the state road.
Okay. That's something, certainly your engineer may have another idea of how to hold that together, as well. I have some reclaim that's holding up well, but it doesn't get the traffic you're gonna get. And
Right.
people aren't turning on it
Right.
and all that other kind of stuff, so. Okay.
I mean,
Any-
the reason we bring things up, like, we don't want things to be a problem in the future, and I don't think you do either.
I do not.
But if we recognize something, we need to identify it and hopefully make it the best outcome it can be.
Absolutely.
Anything else, Alan?
Not yet.
Brian, or Mark, I guess we're going this way.
I'm still reading through these, give me just a second.
I kind of do. I think it involves, I guess, traffic or internal circulation, for lack of a better term. So people are gonna drive in your driveway, turn perpendicular, and then they're gonna back out. So what is your plan? What is your policy about somebody, making sure the kids do what you said they were gonna do? That people are not just backing up into somebody. What's your traffic flow, I think is.
Yep, so part of my plan is to also add a policy to my handbook that talks about not getting your child out of the vehicle until you see that the previous child that's been picked up is in their vehicle. So this way, I mean, this was a policy that we kind of started during COVID anyway, where people weren't all like crowding to drop off at once. I also do all of my drop off and pick up outside of my home, which again started during COVID times. So I meet them on my front porch currently, and with the addition, I would meet them along the side of my garage, or down back behind my garage, and that way, as people are seeing somebody else is being dropped off, they're parked, and then as soon as that person comes back to their vehicle, gets their child in the car, the other person can then work on getting their child out of the car. So that is a policy that I've already rolled out to my families. Everybody hasn't had a hard time with it so far. I would talk about that policy with new families as I toured them.
Okay, and so if 4 people pull up at once for pickup, and there are 4 cars lined up perpendicular to your driveway.
Yep.
So I'm closest to the house. I get out and I go get my kid. And I come back to the car. Then the next car number 2 gets out, gets their kid, and number 1's backing up, or they're getting ready to leave. Is that, if I'm understanding that correctly?
Yep.
Okay, and is there adult supervision out there kind of making sure that's happening? Is who's, kids are outside the door, side of the house, is somebody also paying attention to what the cars are doing and the kids are doing, running through the driveway or not?
Well, this
That
is
makes
part
sense.
of the, absolutely it makes sense. This is part of the reason that I do it individually, so that, I have staff taking care of the children inside, so that I'm allowed to step outside with the child that's currently being picked up. Then the parent comes to me, everybody else is staying in their vehicles. We have a discussion about the child's day. Then that current drop off goes back to their vehicle, gets in, gets their child buckled, the other person is walking up to me, and then that car is pulling out. So I guess the people who are supervising that is me and the current child's parents.
Okay, but there is one of your people, you or one of your people are supervising and making sure that kids are not, parents don't, start talking and the kids,
Correct.
heading for the school playground.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
these are the reasons that these policies are in place for that
Okay.
exact type of thing.
Because that is a concern I have.
Mm.
And then, bear with me just one second, I'm gonna make sure that we're in the right places too. Okay, so then the comment I've got is whatever, is that, you have an existing driveway. And so, then you've had, I assume, or maybe that's the wrong thing to do, but that's an existing driveway that the state of Maine knows is there. Are you widening that driveway, the driveway, not the parking spaces, the driveway?
No,
Okay,
I mean, just parking spaces. I mean, when I was looking through the ordinances, I realized that there are like certain setbacks for parking spaces.
Yep.
So again, I'm deferring to my, engineering team.
Okay.
To follow those ordinances and, technically my driveway as it is will be our driveway and our personal driveway and what's used for people to back out. But other than that, all the parking will be what's added,
okay.
if that makes sense.
And I'm thinking out loud for the board, you're not changing the use. Do you need to go to MDOT is my question. You're not changing the use, you're not changing the driveway width, the access there. So I'm trying to decide because a couple of things came, one is the width of the access, the other is line of sight. And
Right.
there's given the speed there's a minimum line of sight in both directions, which for the site, I'll just tell you now, for the site plan, we're gonna wanna see your engineer to put that on there. I think it's 300 feet, but he'll know better than I, but here's the driveway, so 300 feet that way, 300 feet that way, he's gotta say that is a safe distance.
Okay.
That's your line, or it could be greater, kind of deal. So does that make sense?
Yep.
So that was the other question. I guess the last question I have is if you go to this new plan, does it eliminate queuing on Route 9?
100%.
Okay,
Yes.
so your handbook, I'm just talking out loud, your handbook will say, don't stop on Route 9,
Correct.
circle around somewhere till you come
Yes.
back and okay.
So you had mentioned that you weren't, based on the plan that I see, it is increasing the width of the driveway. Or it's putting a driveway right next to the existing one.
Right.
Is that correct?
Well, that is what I did initially before I sort of dove deeper into the land use ordinance.
Okay.
Just because this was a piece of the project that I didn't realize was so technical. So I was like, this is where we're gonna park. So, I mean, now that I've learned and read through the ordinances, I realize that this image that I added to my application isn't accurate.
Okay.
It's just showing parking area where the plan is to be and not meant to be sort of like exactly how it's gonna look.
So your existing driveway is going to be both the entrance and exit
Correct,
with no increase in the width?
right.
Okay.
I do have another comment or question. Mark or Brian, you guys have anything?
No, I would just, Alan, I would just say we'd wait to see the engineered plans. Yeah, this is not an engineered plan, but if they're not gonna expand the driveway, we'd wait to see what Acorn comes back with. Yeah.
And you guys should know what he's gonna have to go to the MDOT with. I know I've forgotten number of parking spaces. We don't have, being Durham does not have a standard for a daycare number of parking spaces. So, the question for the board is, and for you all is, a little bit of limited research. I found that Lewiston has a requirement for, one parking space for every, employee. And then, Lewiston is 1 for 6, so 1 parking space for every student. Ellsworth is 1 space for every, employee and 1 for every 5, students. And in my mind, your garage could count. So if your cars are in the garage, those are your employees, those are legit parking spaces.
Yep.
So do we have a feel for, a reasonable number that we should require for a daycare
Well,
center?
my concern would be, what is the maximum amount of vehicles that are gonna be pulling in at the same time? If you have 20 children there, could you have 10 cars coming in at once?
So one thing that I can do is make sure that people aren't all coming at once. Because I currently have people sending me a message every time they're coming to pick up and every time they are coming to drop off. And so at one point, because there was a really busy period of time, and that was when I was smaller and I was just by myself, I made sure that people were letting me know so that I could say there'd be too many people here at that time.
Right.
So that is one option that I have for that. There's not usually 20 different families. I currently have 7 families for my 12 kids. I actually have 15 children enrolled because some are part-time, and so, they offset each other's days. The maximum amount that I've had currently in my driveway at one time is 4 cars, in addition to my staff and myself.
The reason I ask that is because I certainly wouldn't want to see a line of cars on Route 9 trying to get in and they don't have any place to go or park.
Right,
It sounds like you're certainly concerned about that also.
yes.
And are we going to have dedicated enough parking spaces?
Mr. Chairman, suggestion. She has an engineering firm, gonna be working on a design. They will need to do a proposal for parking. And, although Durham does not have a specific standard, there are industry standards, the Institute of Transportation Engineers. And, I think you can look forward to Acorn Engineering presenting a site plan that explains the proposed parking.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Just understand that's a concern we have, and that will be something that we're looking at particular. And, if he comes up with, it says, I want to use, Lewiston's, which is 1 for 6, just that's the justification. It works in the city of Lewiston, or it works in Bath, or wherever it may be, or it's the standard that George mentioned. So that somebody is gonna say, yes, look, that'll work for what you're doing. And if there's an additional requirement that you have to impose on parents, we need to build that into the site plan approval as
Okay.
well.
Mr. Chairman, the other comment I would make would be a caution that although it's acceptable for the applicant to make verbal representations about how they might control the number of vehicles that are coming, if you accept less than adequate parking on the basis of those types of management techniques, enforcing that will be absolutely impossible. So I think you should look at this application as if those controls were not in place, would it still work and would it still be safe? So
A fair
I
point.
think it's great to try to manage it that way, but the reality is there's no way you can enforce it. So you should be sure that it will produce a safe result.
So when you're working with your engineer, what's the number? I think it's fair to say that you can limit the number of folks, because if traffic's backed up on 9, that would not be good, and that would be enforceable. I mean, if it becomes a problem, you probably have people who would help you point that out. So I think that's fair, but come up with a good plan where you're gonna park, employees out of the way, and all that other kind of stuff, so that you can get people in and out of there. And,
Safely.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
because that is a good point, because what happens is 20 years from now, when you say, I'm done with childcare, somebody comes along, we want to make sure they understand what the rules are if you get tired of childcare.
Yep, fair
what
enough.
the rules are. Okay, so having done that, are there any other, I'm just looking to see if there's anything else we need to discuss.
So, one of my concern on this particular one, traffic safety impact, without having a engineering plan, how would we be able to approve this?
I think it's incumbent upon them to give us a engineering plan that has safe,
Yeah,
Traffic.
I totally agree.
yeah, and if they can't, if he comes back and says, yeah, I can't do that for you, I can't, you can't take 20 new, we wouldn't approve site plan.
Right.
That's my absolute thought to it.
I do already have the proposal. I didn't get it in time to submit it to you guys. I literally just got it yesterday from them. So he does think he can do it.
Yes, okay.
And so, and we'll present it
He
at the
just
next
needs to put
meeting.
that on paper.
Okay.
Right.
And put his PE stamp on it
Right.
and off we go. Yeah, so I think that's the way, because just because we approve the conditional use, they still have to meet all the traffic, the line of sight and all those other requirements when they actually do the engineering plan.
And there is a draft condition of approval number 2 that specifically states the applicant shall apply for planning board site plan review of the detailed design of the access, parking, lighting, and landscaping. So I think you're covered, and it's okay to give the conditional use approval subject to the design, because if the site plan review is not approved, then they will not be doing any construction.
Yeah. Fair enough?
Yes.
Okay, so number 2, traffic safety impacts. It looks to me like we have findings alpha through golf. I don't think we picked up any additional ones. Are there any other comments? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I will move that the applicant has satisfied a reasonable burden of proof of compliance with the criterion for traffic safety impacts.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional comments? Seeing none, please raise your hand if you agree, if you approve. 4-0. Public safety impacts. The proposed use will not create public safety problems which would be substantially different from those created by existing uses in the neighborhood, require a substantially greater degree of municipal services than existing uses in the neighborhood. Okay, there are 5 findings that the applicant, the planner, and I think there's some from public comment. I will, the fencing issue, do you have a fence at this time?
I do.
There's a fence that goes,
Not in the front of my property.
but where the kids are let loose to do whatever they're going to do?
In the backyard, yes.
Okay. Then you don't, I'm assuming you just don't let them loose out front.
I don't let them loose, no, ever.
All right. But it is now currently fenced?
The backyard is fenced in per DHHS.
Perfect. No more than 48 inches, or 48 inches tall and has its gate that's separate from?
And that's correct.
Do we have a definition for let loose?
Yeah, it's called a finding by DHSS on that. I used to build nursing homes, and so what I learned was that when you're 80, they treat you like you're 5.
Yeah, it's the same.
It's exactly the same requirements. So, okay, so that covers the fence issue. The fire chief, I did some emailing with him today, or texting, whichever. He's going to look at D when you come in for your site review to make sure that he can, do the safe thing with his equipment.
Okay,
He unfortunately tells me that he's no longer allowed to just drive through the front door and get to the back, so he'll figure out if he can get to the back of your building or not.
okay. The state fire marshal's office is also involved.
and the
ahead.
state fire marshal, he's your final approver. But we wanna make sure that Durham Fire Department can get there
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
and get the kids out and do that other stuff.
Mhm.
Are there any other comments on, any questions, I'm sorry, on number 3, public safety impacts?
Will the site plan show where your fence is?
Again,
Yeah, it should.
It should.
okay.
I mean, the good thing about something like that is that if anybody, once something like this is documented, people can review that document and then hopefully would satisfy their questions.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions on any of the other, or all 5 comments, any additional?
John, I would suggest adding F, which would be that the applicant stated that the backyard is fenced in.
Okay,
We had that in another category, but it'd be good to put that here where that came up.
okay.
And will be on the site plan.
Okay. Anything else? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
I will move that the applicant has satisfied a reasonable burden of proof of compliance with the criterion for public safety impacts.
Second.
A second, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments? And that, your motion includes F, since we've written it in there, we'll include F, it'll
Yes.
be on the findings. George, I'm kind of looking at you, so.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, got it.
Any further comments? Seeing none, please raise a hand to approve. 4-0. We're moving on to number 4, environmental impacts. The proposed use will not result in sedimentation, erosion, or have an adverse effect on water supplies. And there's 4 findings in there, 3 from the applicant, and then the required setbacks in the resource protection district. I don't think that's a problem.
Yeah, and just to clarify, there is no setback from the edge of the resource protection district. There's a brook just to the north off their property, and the buffer for that brook, which is Dyer Brook, extends onto their property, but there is no setback under Durham's regulations or state code from, you have to be a certain distance from the edge of the resource protection district, which I think was the focus of the comment.
Okay? So that does not apply, is like
Correct.
the gist of that one. Okay? Any other comments? Brian, please.
So the application only lists RRA as a zone. Does it need to be amended to say that there's an RP zone on the property?
That could be, yes, that would be helpful, and they can do that in the site plan application as well.
Okay.
RP is a resource protection. Excuse me, resource protection. Which shouldn't preclude you, I don't think it'll preclude you from doing anything. It doesn't
Right.
overlap your building extension or anything.
Okay.
It just satisfies all of the check boxes on the application.
And then and part of this is if somebody down the road says you didn't consider RP, it's in there that in fact we did, so.
Okay.
Now,
Anything else?
when we do, I know I had mentioned it earlier, whether it's going to be addressed somewhere else, talk about environmental impact, but erosion control, usually we're looking at that when we're putting an addition on, but in this case, my concern would be the erosion, well, I guess I'll back up on that, because the question was answered on the driveway. Okay. Not need any further things to say.
Okay. Anything else? Looking to my right. Seeing none, do I have a motion to include, for approval for the 5 findings to include site plan should show RP boundary?
And that no setback is required from the Resource Protection District would be a finding.
So that would be F.
With the addition of E and F, I'll make a motion the applicant has satisfied a reasonable burden of proof of compliance with criterion for environmental impacts.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, raise your hand if you approve. Okay, we're halfway through. Scale and intensity of use. The proposed use will be compatible with existing uses in the neighborhood with respect to physical size, visual impact, intensity of use, and proximity to other structures. And there are 8 findings on that one. So any comments on any of the findings? So this is at the back of the house, you can't see it from the road, it looks like a residential addition anyway?
Correct. I'm not even planning to put signage out front, just so that it's even more protected from
Okay,
the community.
you mentioned the fencing in there.
Right.
Any other comments about any of the findings, questions?
So what do we mean by aesthetically landscaped?
Well, this is a good question. I added this because I had talked with George about making sure that there was screening or, buffering between the parking area and the road. So again, I'm going to defer to my engineering team to help me figure out what, to make sure sightlines are still there. And I just want it to still look like a home, essentially. I don't want it to look like there's a big old parking lot out front of my house.
Okay.
Fair enough. Any other questions, comments? George, do we need the board received public input arguing that the proposed daycare center is out of scale with surrounding residential properties. Should we put an I in there that we find that it is not out of scale?
Well, that will be in your motion, which says that they have met that criterion, so I don't think you need to add a
That
finding.
works for me, less typing. Okay, do we have a motion to approve or
I'll make a
disapprove?
motion that the applicant has satisfied a reasonable burden of proof of compliance with the criterion for, public health impacts.
It should be, if you're reading from the printed version that was corrected,
Should be with the criteria for scale and intensity of use.
yeah. The original packet
Okay, sorry.
was incorrect.
I will renege that motion and I'll make a new motion. I'll make a motion that the applicant has satisfied a reasonable burden of proof of compliance with the criterion for scale and intensity of use.
And a second, please. I will second it.
So in that motion, doesn't that exclude item H?
No, because you did receive that as a fact. That's a fact of the record, that you did receive input.
But not that we agreed with it, do we?
That's right, you don't need to agree with it, it's just a fact that was presented during the process.
The way, because the answer that George gave to my question was similar. The applicant has satisfied a reasonable burden of proof of compliance with the criterion for scale and intensity of use, which is, we disagree with that. We could put in a statement if you.
So one of the things that concerns me is, and I had stated it earlier, was, excuse me, that when a conditional use goes out, notification goes to the abutters, and this information supplied was not from an abutter, and we're not having a public meeting.
Okay. I'm not,
So I'm questioning why it's great to have information out there, but why would this be part of our decision process if we're not taking comment?
Can I clarify that again?
Please.
I answered Brian, unless you want to explain it. There's a difference between a public hearing input and written comments submitted, so that when the notices are sent out to the abutters and when the agenda is published on the website, it basically says, public comment will not be taken on an item, but you are encouraged to send written comments to the planning board. And the abutters are not the only people that are affected by a project like this, because we've talked about traffic safety on Hollowell Road, people dropping off kids at the schools. So it's not only the abutters that have the opportunity to give public input, it's pretty much anybody from the public. Now, the board can weigh the input that's received differentially if a person is an abutter compared to someone who's not. But at the same time, I encourage the board to receive and respond to all public comment that's given on applications.
So when we start our meeting, we have that statement that's saying public comment will not be taken. Do we state that to?
At the meeting.
At the meeting.
At the meeting, that's what that's
So do we-
intended to
we
state.
basically state that so we can expedite our meetings?
Well, also, just to have an efficient process, recognizing that applicants are required to have a decision within a specified time frame. And so this, it addresses both the issue of the board's efficiency as well as the legal requirements for making decisions within a timely fashion. And also, finally, recognizing that there are other applicants typically that are waiting to be heard, and so these are all important considerations.
Thank you.
but, and I think on this, in this one.
Do you agree with that, Brian?
Well, Alan, I gotta tell you, receiving these public comments 2 hours before the meeting is a little bit disturbing, but whatever.
And the board can delay the process if you're getting information and you're feeling like you don't have time to process it.
No, I don't feel that at all, because I think we're very thorough in what our findings are and what we investigate.
Yeah, and I think we had the discussion before we started about whether, do we want to do the public hearing? Because, my 3 years, give or take, this is probably as much input as we've received on any particular project. So for those who wrote comments that you don't see in here, it's not necessarily that we didn't read them. I mean, I read all of them, I looked at the pictures, the whole 9 yards, so they were, that input was in fact considered, good, bad, and otherwise.
And they are recognized in the document later.
So, I think we have a motion and a second, correct? Is that,
That's correct.
That's correct.
Yes.
she's telling me it's correct, so, okay, so are there any other comments? We still have the opportunity for comments. Seeing none, please raise a hand if you vote to approve. Unanimous. We are on to number 6, noise and hours of operation. Okay, so the proposed use will be compatible with existing uses in the neighborhood with respect to the generation of noise and hours of operation. You said 7 AM to 4:30 PM, so there's no change, I guess, in that hours. You are saying that 8 children will only increase small amount of noise.
From where it is right now,
Where it
yes.
is. And that's okay because the Durham C says basically it's okay because Durham School makes more noise.
Yes.
Well, we can hear them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
Compete
my
with them.
humor aside, are there any comments or additional noise and hours of operations concerns?
Just
Brian?
one comment. I think somewhere in here, I'll have to dig, but you had mentioned that you'll have children being picked up at 4:45.
I mean, I have one family that I've made an exception for them to come at 4:45.
Would you be willing to change this to 4:45 instead of 4:30?
you know what, that child is going to a different program in the fall, so I'm gonna go ahead and say 4:30 is my closing time.
Got it.
Otherwise, if that leaked out.
I don't want everyone thinking they can come at 4:45
That's
now.
right.
Was it in a correspondence somewhere? I just wanted to clarify.
Yep, thank you, okay.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question and answer. Any other questions on noise and what was the other one? Hours of operation? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
I'll move that the applicant has satisfied a reasonable burden of proof of compliance with the criterion for noise and hours of operation.
Second, please.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other comment? Seeing none, raise your hand if you approve. 4-0. Right title or interest. The applicant has sufficient right title or interest in the site of the proposed use to be able to carry out the proposed use. And I believe that is you own the property.
Correct.
Okay? Are there any other questions, comments, or on this particular one?
I would move that the applicant has satisfied a reasonable burden of compliance with the criterion for right title or interest.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional comment? Seeing none, raise your hand if you approve. 4-0. 8, financial and technical ability. The applicant has the financial and technical ability to meet the standards of this section to comply with any conditions imposed by the planning board pursuant to subsection 7.5. You've given us the cost of the project. You've applied for a loan in grant money. Has a question about your ability to finance and technical ability. And then there's a comment that supporting the technical ability.
Multiple comments.
Pardon?
Multiple comments.
Multiple
That was the
comments.
reference to all the
Multiple.
Yeah,
other
there was.
emails you got.
Okay, so questions or comments?
Well, based on the findings that I see, it's obvious that if something falls through on this, more than likely the project will fall through. So I'm assuming based on what's been presented, it will be successful.
I sure hope so.
Could you just kind of, where are you on the loan and other stuff?
So I'm
What-
working with CEI, which is Coastal Enterprises. They, I have a business advisor through them, and I am applying for a loan product for childcares through them. They plan to bring my application to their group on July 25th, which they meet monthly. If the loan is approved at that point, then I should be able to get monies within 1 or 2 weeks after that. The grant I have already finished the first application of, which is sort of my credentials for the business. The next piece of the application, I need to have like the fire marshal permit, and I need to have the conditional use permit and everything. I need to have all of that so that I can submit that second piece of the application, but that will, I will qualify for $30,000 from that grant. So everything is in the middle of
And then if I-
Yeah, being done.
I'm wondering what the competition is on a grant like that.
So the grant has already been closed, the application process has already been closed, it's already, it was open 2 years ago with money from the COVID relief fund for daycare infrastructure. And there were different pieces, mine qualifies for expanding an existing daycare, and I just need to add spaces and provide more slots for daycare essentially. So, and that grant is distributed by CEI, so they're working closely with the grant distributor. It sounds like that's definitely happening.
So is it fair to say it's a bit of a catch-22 in that to get these things approved, CEI and the loan, you have to have conditional use approval?
Correct,
Okay, so you're caught between a rock and a hard place.
yes.
My concern with this is really somebody starting a big subdivision or a big whatever and running out of money, you know, that they don't have the money to do that. What is your intent if you don't get, if none of this gets approved?
I'm gonna shut her down,
Okay, you'll stick with 8 student or whatever, 12.
Well,
correct?
And so you wouldn't start until you had the loan and the, whatever the other grant.
I'm not really in a rush to start. I don't have, you know, I mean, I have a wait list. I have a very long wait list, but I don't, you know, I'm doing great right now. This is just sort of the next phase of my career. I'm hoping to do this for a very long time, and so I'm kind of letting the pieces fall into place as they need to. But I'm not trying to like break ground by a certain date, essentially. I haven't told anybody that you'll have a spot in January when my numbers are expanded.
Okay. That's my thought. I kind of agree with Alan on unlikely to move forward, but other comments?
So, time-wise, if the grant was approved and the loan was approved, when, do you have a time frame of when that, you may have an answer to that?
Yep,
Like
I
you said the meeting
believe,
on the 25th.
right, I believe in August, I will have an answer on financing.
Okay.
Additional comments, questions? Board members?
Is there a deadline on moving forward after we approve this?
Yes, there is a 1 year to start, 3 years to finish, I believe is the standard.
Okay.
That's under site plan review, not under
Similar to
conditional
a
use.
subdivision, right?
Yeah.
Did you understand what that meant?
Yep.
So that's after the site plan.
Mhm.
And you can always come back and ask again. Hopefully you don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions, comments?
Yep.
Seeing none, I will take a motion.
I would move that the applicant has satisfied a reasonable burden of proof of compliance with the criterion for financial and technical ability.
second.
Moved and seconded. Any other comments? Seeing none, please raise a hand to approve. Okay, it's approved, thank you. Okay, so we're not quite there yet. A couple more things we gotta do. Compliance with land use ordinance standards. The proposed conditional use shall meet all applicable criteria and design or performance standards in all articles of the land use ordinance. Performance standards. The project conforms with the following applicable standards for specific uses and issues. Okay, the board received public comments on the application not meeting the definition of a home-based business, that the 20 vehicle trips per day would be exceeded, and that no more than 30% of the floor area can be dedicated as a non-residential use. And I was confused on this one, George, does that apply since we're going with the
Yeah, and
daycare?
I just clarify for the record that this is not a home-based business. This is a conditional use for a daycare center. So the person who raised the question about the home-based business limitations of vehicle trips and percentage of the floor area, it has no
Doesn't apply.
applicability
apply.
to this project.
Okay, thank you. So, do we need to note that at all?
No, again, what you're doing is you're making a decision based on all the information that was submitted, and you can come to your own conclusions.
Okay, thank you. Having said all of that, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that the proposed conditional use meets all the applicable criteria and design or performance articles and all articles of the land use ordinance.
Second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please raise a hand if you approve. 4-0. And I think this is the last one. Planning board approval conditions. Upon consideration of the criteria listed in subsection 7.4, the planning board may by majority vote attach such conditions in addition to those required by other provisions of this ordinance as it finds necessary to ensure compliance with those criteria and all other applicable requirements of this ordinance. Violation of those conditions shall be a violation of this ordinance. There are two findings. One is the project to be constructed in accordance with the plans, maps, diagrams, specifications, textual submissions, and testimony presented by the applicant and approved by the board. And the applicant shall apply for planning board site plan review of the detailed design of the access parking, lighting, and anything else on that. So, basically what that's saying is you have, if this gets voted yes, you have conditional use approval, but you still gotta meet all the site plan requirements, or there are waivers you could request. Everybody fair with that? Any comments? Members of the board? Mr. Tavares? I will make a motion to apply the following conditions of approval to the permit for conditional use. And as they're written here on this thing, 1 and 2, which I just read off. Do I have a second? All those in favor, please raise a hand. 4-0. Okay, step 1 is done. And so,
Then you do have the decision as well, on the next page.
oh yeah, I always forget that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will make a motion that the planning board grants conditional use of approval of the expansion of Kids Next Door daycare, subject to the adopted conditions of approval.
Second.
Made and second, any additional comments? Seeing none, please raise a hand. 4-0, now you're done with step 1.
Great.
So on to the site plan. Do you have any questions about anything we've discussed or told you have to do?
No, just, actually, so George, you have spoken to my, engineer about what needs to be on the site plan,
Yes.
so he knows all of this, or is there stuff
I
that was
sent
said
them the
tonight?
checklists, the application forms, and all the information.
Okay.
And I followed up with an email just trying to clarify the issue of what they should submit.
Okay, great,
So we'll wait for that, and it has to be in 2 weeks before the next meeting.
great,
Yeah, which I can't remember, it's the first Wednesday of the month, so
yeah,
I don't know if he's ready to do that or not, or if it's gonna be more likely the September meeting.
yeah, I'm not sure, I don't
Okay,
know how
well,
quickly you
it's
can.
up to you and him and being able to.
Yep.
I'd only ask that, don't half-step it, make sure it's done.
Absolutely,
Just try to meet that, instead of trying to meet a deadline.
yep, absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank you. And anybody out there is gonna go home happy? It has no bearing on our decision whatsoever. At least my decision. Some folks like to see happy faces. All right, thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you.
If you're not happy, his truck is the one.
Yes, it's one of the red ones in the bay there. That's it. Can go home if you want.
That's in the garage.
Hang around, we're gonna talk about land use stuff. So, thank you. Okay, so, while everybody's leaving, I guess, George, you wanna just kind of quick update, or maybe you've already done that on the other land use, the non-battery storage land use stuff?
Sure.
Whatever it may be. I think you kind of covered that already, actually, in the beginning.
Well, actually, we had a little bit more detail in the agenda notes, just to give you an update, if I can find mine. Okay, so I did kind of give it in the agenda notes some of the background of how we got here and where we are. But particularly the area that has not been really touched yet by any of the boards or commissions is the issue of the battery energy storage systems, which is one of the priorities that was established by the select board back in late April, May, June. And so I've been doing some research, and this new codification contract has been extremely valuable because
Good.
we gained access to over 3,000 ordinances across the country
Wow.
that they have. And we were able to do a search to identify every ordinance that they have in their system that has dealt with battery energy storage
Have
systems.
you read all 3,000?
And there, no, but there were only 700 of those. 738 to be precise, I think, or 48. But I did notice that of the 21 newest postings in their system, about 90% of them are moratoria. And so just digging into it a little bit deeper, and I did find this very helpful summary of the issues that I put into your packet, the overview of local zoning ordinances for battery energy storage systems. So just like some of the research we did on solar farms, it just kind of gives you what the big framework for looking at and what's typically included in ordinances. So you see on it's page 15 of your handout, your packet. So you see that most ordinances that involve battery or address battery storage systems or energy storage systems, they include definitions, they include size tiers for cutoffs, and typically those are dealing with what's the connection of the battery storage system. Is it a home for their solar and possibly electric vehicle charging? Is it a solar farm where they are storing their energy before it's connected to the grid? Or is it connected directly to the grid? In the case of the new plant down in Gorham, it's 5 acres of these storage batteries. They're connected to the grid, and the purpose of that is to provide that system reliability, efficiency, and all those things that are being promoted by the governor of Maine, really pushing hard for these types of facilities to be built on a fairly significant scale. So typically they treat each of those different classes differently in terms of the regulations and requirements. Deciding where in the community they should be allowed. Typically, you'd look for these more so in industrial areas than in rural areas. But on the flip side of it, where there are power lines, there's going to be a potential desire to put them there, and maybe appropriately so. When you think about the scale of a power line compared to a battery storage system. So those are considerations to put into it. Property line setbacks, fencing and screening, we looked at that on our solar development, noise and lighting, decommissioning plans and funds. See, a lot of this is just the same kind of stuff as solar farms and cell towers. The site plan requirements, many communities have their own ordinance separate. We would incorporate this into the land use ordinance as we did with solar, and then other requirements. They did point out there are some unique and restrictive ordinance elements, and as we indicated, many communities are looking at moratoria because of the fire hazard concerns.
And just outright prohibition,
Yeah.
or just, I mean, is it?
Yeah, outright, either moratoria or you can put in apparently an outright prohibition. And we would look at that, and we'll discuss some of the options in just after I get done the summary. So they have some discussion and takeaways, and the interesting thing about this is a lot of the research that's being provided is being provided by interests that promote this use. And so they're trying to address the concerns that communities are facing. But you have to understand that's coming from the industry perspective. So they don't necessarily look at it, what's in the best interest of the community. They're looking at trying to make this work for the energy industry. So I've taken kind of a grain of salt with all of the research that I've looked at, understanding that that's something to consider. So when you get something proposing that all of the safety concerns can be met, that's typically coming from the energy industry side or government side that's trying to promote alternative energy. So I just suggest you take a hard look at any information that you get, and not just to the substance but also to the source, and is that source potentially biased as you're looking at it. So with all of that, I found this very important document in my estimation, which is the they had a series of, I think, 5 major facility fires in the state of New York. And these are potentially very catastrophic situations where you're dealing with intense fire, potential for hazardous toxic fumes, all of those sorts of things, and extreme hazards for public safety, fire personnel that are responding to these things. I have a son-in-law who's a paramedic fireman in one of the local cities, and he said that they're told if there's a electric car on fire, just push it into a ditch and fill the ditch with water. That's, they're just so intense, the fires. And if you, I mean, remember, you couldn't put a lithium battery in your checked baggage, that sort of thing. So there's some special considerations that kind of differentiate this even from solar farms that you need to be cognizant of. But at the same time, there are people with a lot more qualifications than I have to speak to these safety issues, and you should be getting input from your own fire chief as well. And so with that, again, caveat to looking at this New York State Interagency Fire Safety Working Group Fire Code Recommendations. This has just been released within the last month or so in response to the New York governor's concern with the fire hazard of these facilities. And looking through these recommendations from this New York State Working Group, which seems to be in all the country way ahead of everybody else in terms of dealing with these things, both in terms of the number of facilities that have been built and the intense, most of the ordinances, the majority of ordinances are in New York above all other states. So I think that's a good place to learn about these things. So that I highlighted through this document what those concerns are, and I'll just briefly run you down through those. The New York State Battery Energy Storage System safety efforts. So the first recommendation they made, of about a dozen, I think, was requiring industry-funded independent peer reviews for all projects. And one of the difficulties I've experienced in my 40-plus years of this type of work is that sometimes finding an expert that's qualified to do the peer review, especially in a new market and in a very small rural market like Southern Maine compared to San Francisco or Dallas or places like that, the availability of consultants with the expertise to provide you with a peer review that you need can be a challenge. So there's just something to consider. How many experts are there in the country on this? Are any of them in our region? And how available are they to provide you with a peer review? So they were pointing to that as being a critical need to address the safety of these facilities in New York. The need for, and they suggested that the communities require industry-funded independent peer reviews for all projects. And that's similar to our typical peer review system where you want an independent peer reviewer, not someone who's working for the applicant. The second recommendation was explosion controls. And New York's working group recommended that they expand the requirement for explosion controls to include BESS cabinets, BESS, which is battery energy storage system cabinets, in addition to rooms, areas, and walk-in units. Additionally, provide design requirements or language for what constitutes a passable system. So it's one thing to say there is a safety explosion safety control system, but what is that? What does it look like, and how effective is it? How is it tested? Those sorts of questions. The third recommendation of this task force put together by the governor of New York is to require that qualified personnel are available for dispatch within 15 minutes and able to arrive on scene within 4 hours to provide support to local emergency responders. Again, where does that come from? And how do you guarantee that it's going to be available? They're saying that's critical to the safe operation of these systems. On signage, number 4, extend safety signage requirements beyond the BESS unit itself to include perimeter fences or security barriers and include a map of the site, BESS enclosures, and associated equipment. They recommend directly including signage requirements with applicable National Electrical Code references for grid interactive BESS operating in parallel with other power generating sources. So we're dealing with very high voltage stuff, so that's why they're stressing those things. And update the fire code B under that one to require clear and apparent identification of explosion control panels. Number 5, update the fire code to ensure that battery energy management systems data is monitored by a 24/7 staffed network operations center. Critical failure notification should be immediately communicated to the site operator owner to take corrective actions as necessary. Number 7, remove the fire code exemption for BESS projects owned and operated by electrical utilities to ensure that all projects comply with the fire code. Apparently there's been some problems there with their utility companies. And then under proposed recommendations for the fire code, this is the New York Fire Code, emergency response plans and regular fire department training include a requirement for emergency response plan, ERP, and annual local first responder training for every BESS installation. Almost done. 2, central station monitoring of BESS facilities include a fire code requirement for monitoring of fire detection systems by a central station service alarm system to ensure timely, proper notification of the local fire department in the event of a fire alarm. 3, fire stops, barriers, and fire breaks mandate the installation of fire stops for all BESS enclosures, penetrations to prevent the propagation of fires from one BESS unit to another through these pathways. Periodic special inspections for introduce a new provision in the fire code mandating industry-funded special inspections for BESS installations to ensure thorough safety and compliance. 5, include cabinets in all fire requirements that pertain to rooms, areas, or walk-in units except for fire suppression requirements as they may be inappropriate for cabinets. And then they go on to some additional recommendations in terms of investigating the fires that have happened, the causes, how do you establish those causes. So all of that leads me to the conclusion that Durham should seriously consider this at a different level than you considered solar or some of the other issues that we've addressed. And so I had in the agenda notes suggested at this point, rather than jumping into drafting a set of regulations like we did for solar based on models like some of these that are being proposed, we've kind of taken an initial step of saying, you know, does Durham have the capacity to regulate this type of use? Do you have the system capacity administratively in terms of the planning board, code enforcement? Do you have the capacity in terms of your public safety system, fire rescue? So there are some options for how the town could proceed on this, and I outlined those. The first would be to consider whether or not, this is on page 14 of the packet, and I'll close here, 4 options for response would be, number 1, a de facto prohibition per the conditional use criteria for public safety, public services, and scale and intensity of use. I recommend getting a legal opinion, either from MMA or your new attorney, as to whether or not, if a system or proposal similar to what happened in Durham, 5 acres of batteries were proposed, would these types of information provide an adequate legal basis for a decision to deny that type of an application? Or would the town have a difficult time if an energy proposal is made with lots of expert testimony verifying how safe the facility is going to be? So how much discretionary authority do you have under the conditional use criteria to respond to an application? Now, there may be some applications that are appropriate. So for example, a solar farm that has a limited battery storage capacity compared to a 5-acre one. There may be some applications where you could meet the conditional use criteria. But how much authority do you have under the conditional use criteria to deal with a major project that might be proposed? Second option would be to just say the town, this is not workable for Durham. We're convinced of that, for whatever reasons. Rural character, public safety limitations, concerns for the hazardous impacts of the environment. You could express a prohibition of battery energy storage systems in the ordinance, and again, you might want to differentiate between different levels. Third option is to try to draft regulations if it's perceived that this could be an income generator, tax generator for the community, which has a very limited commercial, industrial tax base. That would at least be worth considering this as an option if the safety concerns can be addressed. So you could, there would be a basis for trying to draft regulations to address the design and fire safety issues. Do everything that was recommended in the New York Governor's Task Force. And if that can work for Durham, then you might want to consider drafting some regulations. Or if you were to move in that direction, probably option number 4 would be advisable, which would be to do a temporary moratorium to develop that research and study. So under Maine law, you can adopt a moratorium on any land use. There are state requirements for the process for doing that. You're typically limited to 6 months to do the research, and it can be extended for another 6 months. So that would give you a year to try to develop a response to this. So what I've done is laid out those options, and you may want to, rather than drafting an ordinance and putting that out for public, you may just want to put that set of options before the public and seek public input on it and provide some of this information out to the board.
So has Gorham identified or addressed all these safety issues?
They have no standards in their ordinance, like most Maine communities. There have been about 5 of these, I guess. One was at Cousins Power Plant, inside their facility. One was in Rumford.
2 in Rumford.
I saw that in the article about the Gorham facility, they identified 5 different communities that have done these. I think Rockland, Bruce Bay. There were several communities that have done these. Typically, they're being done in industrial parks or part of utilities facilities. So,
But it's interesting that if they've approved these things without having the safety concerns addressed, why did they do it?
Well, the Gorham one, if you look at the FAQs that George had sent out from the Gorham, they've identified quite a few safety concerns.
Well, they've identified them, but
They didn't have, they use a condition, I think they use a conditional use process and then,
and site plan review.
and site plan, they got what they could. Rumford, I don't, especially on camera, the planning guy was very helpful, but basically, I think it's fair to say they didn't have standards. I mean, I'm maybe paraphrasing a little bit there that,
And some of these were probably approved before this rash of fires.
yeah.
yeah, I don't know how either one of them, Rumford's, I talked about this before, but there's 2 of them. Both of them are, if you're familiar with Rumford, one is near the dam paper mill, the VA medical center. The other, and that's in an industrial area. The other one is in an industrial area south of town, right next to a gas-fired power plant. So, because I think the other issue, and George does a great job on the safety issue, the other issue for Durham is, maintaining the rural character. I mean, solar plants or solar parks, farms are one thing, this is another. And so, I mean, I would strongly recommend, if you get a chance, to get up to Rumford, get over to, Gorham, I think is still building it, so there's probably not much to see yet. But I think that's the other concern, is that
you know, we keep talking about rural character, and granted, solar farms maybe take up a bigger thing, but, these are big. I mean, I think Rumfords are not, they're not 5 acres, they're not, probably not an acre, but they are big. They are, one of them was extremely noisy. And so it's something to consider. But I think it's fair to say, the Gorham thing did, my look at it, they did put out some, when they did conditional use, their conditions would be useful to us. You know, for instance, they talk about, I think it's 855 or 880 NFP, the National Fire Code, whatever, I think it's 855 that applies to battery storage, large scale battery storage. So there is some information out there, but I don't, you know, I don't think they made them up as they went. And I think Ryan Rumford's case is kind of, you know, these are butt ugly areas anyway. What do we care about? You know, there was no rural character they were trying to protect. They really weren't worried about neighbors because it was an industrial park.
Right.
And so I'm not faulting them. They just had the fortune of, you know, the right place to do that. So my thought is in line with George's, which is we spend some time talking about, before we go into a lot of effort to say, okay, this is the setback, this is the fence height, you gotta have 6 inches underneath it for animals or whatever we came up with, which were all good solar farm stuff. What do we wanna do and how do we wanna, you know, figure it out with the town, what do they wanna do, what would they like to have? Cause I'm sure there's a push for, hey, can we get taxes? And put it over on Stackpole, and it's only gonna bother John and Mark, who cares?
Now, the
So,
rural
that
character
true?
part is interesting because,
I care.
you know, the Gorham facility is 600 kilowatts, right? And when I look at the stuff that George sent out, that's considered tier 2. So that's a small facility.
Yeah.
And the New York regs talk about anything above 600 kilowatts. So all of that criteria is bigger. When I thought tier 2, I'm like, oh, this is a small little thing. And then I looked at Gorham and it's, oh, tier 2 is huge.
it is huge.
And tier 1 is even bigger than that. It's like, holy cow, these are big facilities. So yeah, even a tier 2, I don't think would meet our rural character,
Right.
you know,
Right.
what we want to maintain as rural characteristics.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big chunk. I don't know if it's safety, in my mind, the safety is obviously more important than rural, but but not by much. I mean, it's, you know, if we do want to do that, and do we want to have that? And unfortunately, the power line runs through, other than the power line, to relatively pristine territory. I mean, you know, there's lots of trees and other things around it, and you're gonna go in and you're gonna cut out 2 or 3 acres or whatever it may be. And I'm sounding very negative, probably because I am. But I think, you know, we probably need to figure out, is this what Durham wants to do? You know, which of the options? I think, you know, up against the April, nothing of the, was it 4 options, 5 options? All of them require town approval.
Yeah,
So
oh,
even the
definitely.
moratorium for 6 months, that's a town meeting. I guess it's extendable for another 6 by the select board, if I remember.
Usually, it would be a town meeting.
Town meeting. Yep. So, you know, what do we want to take to the town meeting? But I think, and,
Although, I would question with a town attorney or someone that if the action of the town meeting delegated to the select board the authority
Good
to
point.
extend it for 6 months, you might be
That
able to
would-
do that.
that would make a lot of sense. So, I mean, I had people come up, as with every meeting, at the end of the town meeting and say, oh geez, I wish I'd gone to the meetings on solar, you know, can we change it? It's like, sure, a year from now. So, but I think this is one in my mind that solar farms, whether you like them or not, that's kind of accepted technology. I mean, whether you like them or not, they're solar farms. There's all kinds of arguments about are they safe and how are you gonna dispose of them.
Right.
This is a different level concern in my mind,
Yeah.
so.
Can I ask, so George, in your summary here, you say, and I heard rumblings of this, but I haven't heard any real details. But third bullet point here, page 12, it says, in addition to collaborating with the planning board on resource protection amendments, the Conservation Commission will consider continuing work on solar energy system locations now that the open space plan application was not approved for grant funding. What does that mean?
Well, back to the kind of the strategy session that was done earlier in the year with the select board and the leaders of the various boards and commissions. The select board tried to work with the leadership of the various land use policy groups to try to set what are the priorities for the next town meeting.
Okay.
And so last year, the Conservation Commission had explored whether or not to look at where solar farms should be located in Durham and not located in Durham. And so they had looked at, Topsom, I think, they had looked at where they not only prohibit them in certain areas, they have a system of mitigation fees, so that if you do put them in prime farmland, for example, then you pay, almost like the wetland compensation under Army Corps rules, you have to pay a fund, into a fund that then goes to purchase conservation easements on other agricultural land. So because we were looking to get a set of regulations in place in case a solar farm comes to the planning board, they agreed to defer consideration of those issues of locating where you should and shouldn't put solar farms and whether you should do a compensation system. So they were going to consider that this year unless they got a grant to do an open space plan for the community. They did not get that grant funding, so they were going to consider picking up the solar phase 2 study in lieu of doing the open space plan. That's what that was about.
Okay. And I also heard some chatter about, is there an applicant that wants to put a solar farm in town or a battery storage facility?
We have had inquiries in the past few years on both tracks.
Okay.
Which precipitated the solar, and since then we've been contacted by interests in doing a battery energy storage system.
All right, one other comment I have that I think, I don't know if this helps drive this conversation further or not, but where's the Gorham stuff? The Gorham facility there we go. It says the project will support the state's goal of 80% renewable energy generation by 2030 and 100% renewable energy generation by 2050. So if this one facility is going to carry the state's requirement, then why would we feel any pressure?
Let's just clarify, that's not one facility. That's a whole network of facilities. Not Gorham. Gorham's
The
is,
completion of the Crosstown project, oh, so Crosstown project is more than just Gorham?
yes, they're a company that's doing a lot of these. But the reference that you made to fulfilling the governor's goal and the state goal of energy independence or renewables, those percentages, that's the whole system. That's not one facility. And you're gonna need multiple facilities to be able to meet that goal. Just like you're gonna need multiple solar farms, multiple wind turbines to do the alternative energy sources system. You're gonna need lots of those facilities, both from the generator as well as from this battery storage.
It's probably fair to say, and I will keep my political views out of this, is that there will be strong interest at the state level on I don't know if mandating it. I mean, a part of me says it's just gonna be like affordable housing. You must approve battery storage, facilities, because that's, you know, if you get enough towns to say no, eventually they're gonna make you say yes. My politics aside of that, but at this point, we have the liberty authority to come up with something. And, say, we don't wanna do it, we're gonna prohibit it. We'll take a look at conditional use and give it a fair review so that if it's inside a, solar farm and it's the right size and chief is happy that he can, protect it safely, maybe we do that. Or, it's 5 acres and, where are we going to put it?
And it could be a combination of those 4 options. Could be a moratorium on some parts and do regulations on other parts.
Or just a good old fashioned prohibition, but,
Yep. Yeah, prohibition of certain scale, and then moratorium on the other scale to be able to explore whether that's workable. So, again, you could do a combination of those 4 options.
and my thought would be is we have this discussion here, and then Juliet would like to participate, and she's smart on this kind of stuff. Unfortunately, she's not here the next couple of meetings. And so she would be smart on the technical pieces of it. But, we then, my thought going forward is we say, okay, of the 4 options that George presented, let's present all 4 to the town somehow in a meeting here where we get as many people as we can in. Do we do a survey that get as much information out as we can so that people can make an educated decision, recommendation, whatever? Because somebody's able to say, man, just give me tax money.
There's more to it than that.
Yeah, well, there is, but
I know. Yeah.
and I think that's probably insulting to people, that people who want lower taxes don't necessarily want to lose the rural character or anything else, but that may play into folks' minds. But anyway, we present options and say, as George did, here's the 4 options. What do you want to do? And here are the pros, cons. Here's what that means to have a prohibition. Here's what it means to have a moratorium. Seems to me if you're gonna do a moratorium, you've already made a decision to, at some point in time, come up with standards that you're willing to accept battery storage. We just need more time to do that, so we don't just get a project dumped on us. And then, I think it is a good place to start, George, would be with, we now have a town attorney or MMA to say, what if we went the conditional use route? Is that defensible? Because I suspect these guys have fairly significant lawyer team. I mean, seemed like CMP came armed with 2 or 3.
I know, Jesus, yeah.
Just over friggin' 3 feet in addition to a pole size, they came well armed. And we shouldn't do everything based upon that, but we do need to recognize that, hey, that is a potential. Can we defend whatever decision we make? So, other thoughts?
This is great backup, George, thank you.
It is
I
well
didn't
done.
do any more research after or beyond what you sent out here, but it's good stuff.
So my thought would be, probably, George, correct me if I'm wrong, because George's got lots of balls in the air on a lot of stuff, but do something, information meeting with the town in September, and then put a survey out October, because if the decision is to go, and this may not work time-wise, but if everybody says, no, we want to allow them, and we want you to write an ordinance, an article that will allow that safely, character-wise, we would have to do that. We have to have something ready for first Saturday in April. I guess is what I'm saying. Is that kind of that timeline work where, but I do think putting too much effort into, you know, a lot of work went into the solar ordinance, and with George did a lot of research. The Conservation Commission did a lot of research and a lot of time. So do we want to do that if in fact we're going to lean towards either a moratorium where we have extra time, or a prohibition where, you know, don't waste any time on it?
Do they come hand in hand with a solar farm?
Could I think would be a fair statement, right?
The ones that I think we're seeing, like the new one down in Cumberland, I don't think that they have battery storage associated with them. I think they're connecting right to the CMP distribution lines.
I think it takes a lot of power. I mean, I think, you know, it would have to be a pretty darn big solar farm to
Yeah.
make these batteries worthwhile. I mean, Rumford is getting it off the hydro dam, you know, when power's low, power need is low. So I don't know what that is compared to a solar farm. The other one was coming off a gas-fired power plant. So they were probably able to pump a lot of megawatts into that system at
And
nighttime.
there's one over at Cousins Island that probably does the same thing.
Yeah. I thought Cousin Island was closed, but anyway, those are just thoughts. I mean, does that make sense that we just shoot to get something together to go to the town in September?
But
You
not
know.
giving them too many options.
Yeah, do we cut it, well, one, I think we get the conditional use thing answered fairly quickly by the attorneys. Weeks, we now have an attorney or MMA, whatever it may be. So that may or may not take one off our plate. And I think in my mind, there's sort of two of them. One is prohibit it, the other one is come up with standards and standards plus a moratorium. So that, you know, we've got a year from now, it'd be 18 months, before we got to vote on it. Or we ask set up a special town election, June primary or something. I don't think I guess my question would be, can we get to standards between now and the 1st of April? That we-
Potentially, you might want to consider two of the options if you want to, you know, just not put it all out there. And that would be to say, the two options would be do an outright prohibition or do a moratorium to give
Yeah.
time to study it in depth and develop an appropriate response based on Durham's comprehensive plan and capacity to deal with this type of development. So those would be potentially two options that you put, just outright prohibition based on safety and rural character concerns, or keep it open for economic development purposes, tax-based, whatever, and then spend 18 months studying this issue in depth to develop an ordinance that'll work for Durham, which might include excluding certain classes of these facilities and properly regulating others that are within your capacity to regulate.
I'd be leaning towards a moratorium.
As opposed to the prohibition?
Yeah, there's more to learn, and not necessarily us, there's other towns that are going to have the bigger capacity that are gonna be able to do it, and we're not going, other towns or cities. Without exploring all of those, at this point, right now, I'd say I wouldn't go along necessarily with prohibition. I think we should explore it some more.
Yeah, and do we,
But we're not ready to present anything.
so do we present those two options and get the feeling for the town? Or do we just, I mean, I lean towards just an outright prohibition.
With justification.
Yeah, you know,
Obviously.
exactly, in my mind, they're not safe and, you know, it hurts the rural character.
Yeah, but what about all the revenue?
Yeah, I would have, to. I'm not gonna be, I won't run for.
Don't do it just before the tax bill comes out, or just after it comes out.
Just well, I mean, I think that, but the other.
What are we doing this for?
Well, the other thing is that there is a belief that battery storage is a major part of the green energy movement. That it will provide, make up some of the shortfall that solar and wind can't do, right now. That it gives you it's a piece of the green energy
Yeah, it is.
pie,
It
and
is.
there are those who would believe that that's a piece that we don't want to prohibit it necessarily in Durham.
But do the pros outweigh the cons?
Well, that's the challenge, and that's one I think that, do we want to go forth as the board? We don't necessarily have to decide that today, and say, we are for prohibition, or we are for standards with a moratorium to get us there. So that's sort of the question. Or we want to put those two options out to the people and say, what do you want to do? Because, the pros are, it is a part of the green energy puzzle, and there is tax money. The cons are, can they be done safely?
Right.
And that's the research that we need to get with Chief on.
Exactly.
And outside people to say, tell you what, they can be. I mean, I think if I remember the Rumford conversation was, they just kind of decided, if it's on fire, let it burn. So you're talking a 40-foot Connex burning with a whole bunch of other 40, anyway.
Yeah, I remember all the chemicals they poured into the Androscoggin River back in the 60s, 50s.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
There
just
was-
let it burn.
There was a thing on the other day about Emerson's, when I first came up to Maine dating my wife, Emerson's was burning, the entire place.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So,
You can buy it.
town refuses to take it over.
Well, there's
Well,
a
I wonder
reason for
why.
that.
I'm sorry, we're on budget discussions now, but, so how do we want to, that's, I guess, a question for a future date is, how do we want to go forward? Do we want to do go to the town and say, here's the pros and cons on this, here's the pros and cons on that?
No, I think what George had mentioned, those two options are the things that we need to explore.
Yeah,
I would agree with that.
and explore them between now and then to some extent, and then look at September. I guess if you go with the moratorium, you don't have to be in a super big rush, because the moratorium buys you another year.
But what, anybody's gonna be asking, well, if you wanna get educated on it, you're gonna say why? What opportunity, are we missing an
Yeah.
opportunity or not? What are the risks of that opportunity?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What is it, load up a bus of Durhamites and drive to Rumford, or drive over to Gorham, and
Well, I tell you, I was on the building committee for the school back in, when was it, 2010? And we drove all over the state.
yeah. I mean, I would commend you if you
Different-
got
different ideas.
nothing to do, if you want to go to Rumford and look at them, or Gorham, and, because, when you look at them and you say, yeah, this is a butt ugly area.
Yeah, go to the height of land and see if you can see the smoke when it's burning.
My
guarantee
family
you.
we went up to Rangeley over the weekend, and my family did not want to go cut into Rumford to look at the battery storage sites.
I can't imagine that.
I can't imagine why. But
It's
they
all about the
did.
experience.
To
Yes.
try to conclude,
George is already.
George is getting on to overtime.
that's right, I'm on the clock.
Yes, so,
But
Okay,
what I was
that's
just what I was hearing from Alan, and there seemed to be consensus of the members present, that you'd kind of lean toward two of the four options, those being, consider an outright prohibition to present to the public as an option, or a moratorium to do an in-depth study of this issue.
I think that's a consensus.
yeah, I would
Yeah.
agree.
To present to the public, in the meantime, we will look at the conditional use ability to regulate these things as an interim step.
Yeah, and if the attorney, right now we have nothing. We're kind of where we were with solar this time last year, was, what if somebody comes in with, to Brian's question, with a, and I have to be careful in particular that we don't come across as prejudiced. I mean, if somebody were to show in next month with the battery storage thing, they would get a fair look under the, whatever units. I mean, we have to give them that fair,
Yep.
fair evaluation.
True.
So,
Yes.
until we have something going with it. So, I think, is there anything else? Oh, Juliet asked, could we postpone, not do the meeting on the 24th, because she can't make it, and she gave some dates. I'm reluctant to make changes to that.
Yeah, I am too.
Because we're not at a point where, Juliet, if you're listening, we're not at a point to start locking anything down. I mean, we're talking about broad brush kind of.
Yeah.
So there's time at the August meeting for her to join in the discussion, and she brings a lot to the discussion.
Yes,
And I don't
yes.
want to shortchange that. So let me ask you this, George, what do we need the 24th? What else will we do on July 24th? It's supposed to be a workshop on battery storage.
Right, it was on ordinances, so.
Do we need to have that meeting? Do we want to pick up, we've got Bowie Hill and Ruby Lane couldn't make it by the 24th.
Well, it's 2 weeks from today,
Today,
so,
did Bowie Hill submit?
not that I'm aware of.
Yeah,
I
they
was-
couldn't.
By 5 o'clock, we didn't get any new applications.
So the question then is, do we just want to not do the 24th of July?
And you could put this discussion on the August agenda.
Why don't we do that?
That'd be my thoughts. One would save George some hours, saves all of us some summertime. Plus I'm having a Conway place, so I'll be grumpier than usual.
So you're gonna cancel,
Hard as that may be to believe, everybody.
you're gonna
So,
cancel.
yeah, I think we'll
July 24th
cancel.
Workshop.
Yeah, let's just cancel it, George. I can't think of any reason, we don't have any other, daycare can't get there, Ruby can't get there at this point, get their stuff in, and what was the other, Bowie Hill?
George, who was our support replacement?
Support
For
for
minutes.
minutes, it's gonna be Devin.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just a mix-up in communication within the office. I
Okay.
was told by Kimberly that they weren't gonna do it anymore, so it was just mix-up in
Well, that's good.
communications.
Okay,
I move
motion,
to adjourn.
second?
Second.
Assume there's no comments, all in favor, raise a hand. We're out of here, please turn your mics off. George, thank you for setting that up. I'm kind of impressed with what Devin's volunteering, so you're on committees and some other stuff. Well, it's, good for him, yeah.
Well, he enjoys doing it, he could
Well, he brings new blood, it's not